How was your day? Maybe someone asked you to do something you weren't ready for, and you did it anyway, because the world wouldn't wait. There's a wizard at the heart of the British Isles who knew the future, and did the work anyway. His name was Merlin. If today asked too much of you, he'd understand. Set the day down now. Listen for the rain on stone, the slow drip of water in a hidden cave, a single voice speaking in the dark. The story has already begun. A man with silver hair sits on a stone bench inside a cave of quartz. His staff lies across his lap. He has chosen this. He knows what comes next, and he is not afraid. Outside the cave, a young woman in pale blue silks watches him drift away. She is the one who placed him there. He had seen this moment 1,000 times, and walked toward it anyway. This is the central mystery of his life. He saw the woman who would seal him away, long before she was born. He taught her his magic anyway. Why would anyone do that? He could have run, he could have lied. He could have changed one small thing, and broken the chain. He chose, instead, to be the kind of man who keeps his promises to the future. Maybe you know that feeling. The thing you can't avoid. The promise you made before you understood the cost. The choice that will cost you. And you make it anyway. You've been there. This is what we do here. Every week, one story. One night. Something that happened a long time ago, and still has something to say about now. Adjust the pillow, find the warmth. If you drift off before the end, Merlin won't mind. He has watched many sleepers, in many ages. He knows the way you go. This is only the beginning of his story, the part most people never reach. That's still ahead, the forest, the lake, the cave. But not tonight. Tonight, just this much. If tonight felt like something, subscribe. We'll be here next week. Another story, another night like this one. Now back to ours. To find the beginning, we have to go back. Long before the cave, long before the lake. To a small kingdom in Wales, in a time when Rome had just left these islands. The legions had marched south to Rome and never returned. The roads they built were still there. The towns they raised stood half empty. The land remembered them, and was learning to forget. Into this in-between world, a child was born. His mother was a young noblewoman who had taken the veil, promised to no man. The local priest asked her who the father was. She had no answer. She told them, finally, about a visitor in her sleep, a figure of light who came and left no trace. The priests called it a demon. The mother called it a mystery. The boy was born quiet, with gray eyes that seemed to know. They named him Merlin. In time, the world would call him Merlin. He did not cry as other children cried. By his 2nd year, he was speaking. By his 5th, he saw things that had not yet happened. He told his mother once that the rain that day would stop before noon. It did. He told her a sheep would be lost in the high meadow. It was. The neighbors began to keep their distance. They did not yet know his name in the south. Word travels in a small country. The boy with gray eyes who knew the weather, who finished sentences his mother had only thought, who slept very little and watched the dark. His mother loved him. She also feared him a little, the way you might fear a small wild bird that came to live in your hands. She did not always know what to say to him. Footsteps echo through stone passages of a small convent. The other women whispered when she passed. They had agreed, by silent vote, that the boy was strange. They did not say cursed. They did not say blessed. They said strange. The boy did not seem lonely. He did not seem to need other children. He went instead into the hills. He listened to the wind. He talked to ravens. The ravens, the local folk swore, talked back. One of the ravens, the oldest people said, was no raven at all. It was the world watching back. The boy had a way of catching its eye. The boy was already learning, and no one had taught him a thing. There were nights when he could not sleep. He would walk barefoot to the door and stand looking at the mountains. The world had so much to say to him, and most of it was waiting to happen. His mother knew, though she would not say. She had seen the same look in her own father, who had been called Fae by the river people. The gift skipped and landed where it would. It had landed here. When the boy was 7, an old man came down from the hills. He carried a long staff. His beard was already gray. He had heard, even there, of the child with knowing eyes. He stood at the cottage door. He did not knock. He waited until the boy himself opened it. The boy looked up at him without surprise. The two of them, somehow, had been expecting each other. "You are coming with me," the old man said. He did not say it like a command. He said it like a small kindness, offered to a traveler who has been on the road a long time. The boy nodded. His mother kissed his forehead. She did not weep, though she wanted to. She had known this morning was coming since the day he was born. She watched them walk up the hill until they were small. The path went up into mist. It went past stones older than the country. It went past a spring where the water was cold even in summer. The old man said nothing for a long time. The boy was content with that. At last they came to a small hut of stone and turf. Smoke rose from a hole in the roof. Bundles of herbs hung drying outside the door. "This is where you'll learn to listen," the old man said. Inside there was a single low cot, a hearth, a small wooden table, and a great many books. Real books, Welsh and Latin, and something older still. The boy did not yet know how rare books were here. The first lesson was not magic. It was silence. The second lesson was not magic either. It was naming. By the end of the first year, the boy knew the name of every tree on the hillside, and what each one was for. The third lesson took longer. It was watching. He sat on a rock in all weathers and watched the same valley for a year. By the end of it, he could tell when the rain would come by the tilt of the grass. He learned to see what was already there. That, the old druid told him, is the whole of it. Magic is not making something appear. It is finally noticing what has been waiting to be seen. Picture this, the old druid said one night. You are a candle. The valley is the room. Notice the corners that are dark, and notice how the light reaches them anyway. The boy closed his eyes. He felt the room around him. He felt the hill the room was on. He felt the country the hill was in. He felt, for one quiet second, the curve of the earth itself. When he opened his eyes, the old druid was watching him with something like sadness. You felt it, he said. The boy nodded. Then you understand, the old man said, why you cannot stay here forever. Some are made for hills. Some are made for kings. The old man had been one of the first. The boy, he had known from the beginning, would be one of the second. The world would come for him soon. Stay with this. The boy he is now becomes the man you know. Every choice from here on shapes a kingdom. The mountain hut will not last, but the listening will. They lived this way for 6 years. By the time the boy was 13, he had read every book in the hut. He had set bones. He had named the constellations. He had watched a child come into the world, and an old man go out of it. 3 days pass before the old druid speaks of leaving. The boy is mending a torn cloak by the fire when the old man finally says it. There is a king in the south, he says. A bad one. He has heard your name. Vortigern had been a warlord, then a regent, then a king. He had taken the crown by stealing it. The old kings had been killed. The new king's tower would not stand. He needed a sacrifice. He had heard there was one to find. His tower had risen by day and fallen by night, 3 times. The stones cracked from beneath, as if pushed up by something hidden. His advisors told him a fatherless boy's blood would steady the foundation. They believed it. He wanted to. The advisors had asked, where will we find such a boy? One of them had heard a story from the north. A nun's son in Wales, no man as father. The advisors smiled. They thought it would be easy. The old druid told the boy this without softening. He had never softened anything. The boy listened with that same calm gray gaze and asked one question. Will I die? The old man considered and answered, not today. The riders came 2 days later. 6 men in scaled leather, one in a captain's red cloak. They knew exactly which hut. The old druid stood at the door. The boy stood beside him. He did not hide. The captain dismounted. He looked at the small boy with the unsettling gray eyes. He looked at the old man with the long staff. "We have come for the child," he said. The old man bowed his head just once and stepped aside. "You are not afraid?" the captain asked. The boy's voice was clear and quiet. "I know what is going to happen," he said. "It does not require my fear." The captain did not reply. He had been promised a sacrifice. He had been given something else. The old druid bent close and said one thing into the boy's ear. The boy nodded. He did not turn back. He climbed onto the captain's horse. The riders rode south. The old man watched them disappear into the mist. They rode for 3 days. They slept on the road. The captain found himself, against his orders, treating the boy with strange care. Bread first. The drier place by the fire. He did not understand it. The boy did, and said nothing. On the 3rd day they came to the King's Hill, Vortigern's tower foundation. The trench was muddy with 3 days of rain. The fallen stones lay where they had fallen. The king himself stood at the rim of the pit, looking down. The captain dismounted. He helped the boy down himself. He turned to the king. "My lord, we have brought him." Vortigern turned. He looked at the boy. He had expected someone smaller or larger, anything but this. The king's chief advisor stepped forward. "My lord, the rite must be performed at sunset. The blood will steady the foundation." He had practiced the words. He had not practiced what to do if the child looked back at him. "Before you cut my throat," the boy said clearly, "shall I tell you why your tower keeps falling?" The advisor stopped. The king lifted his chin. The wind shifted. Even the rain seemed for a moment to wait. Vortigern's mouth opened. He had not expected speech from a boy he intended to bury. Now there was speech. Worse, there was sense in it. He glanced at his advisor. The advisor looked at the ground. "Speak then," the king said. He tried to make it sound like a command. It sounded instead like a man asking for help. The boy stepped to the edge of the pit. He pointed down into the dark water at the bottom. "Your tower falls," the boy said, "because you are building it on water. And under the water, 2 things sleep. They do not want your tower. They want each other." Vortigern looked down. He saw only black water. He looked back at the boy. The boy did not look at him. The boy was still looking at what no one else could see. "Drain it," the king said hoarsely. "Drain the pit." The Britons of those years did not have wizards in the way later stories tell. They had bards and druids and seers, men and women who listened deeply and remembered everything, and sometimes spoke truth no one wanted to hear. They were not feared exactly. They were respected the way you respect the river that floods. You spoke to them politely. You listened when they spoke. You did not always do what they said, but you remembered who had warned you. Merlin was made of this older lineage and something else. The hermit had taught him the listening. The mother had given him the strange gift. He was, as the Welsh would later say, between worlds. Most prophets are. There is a name in Old Welsh for what he was. Onid, the one carrying inspiration. The breath that comes in from elsewhere and uses your throat to speak. It does not always tell you what you would rather hear. This is the world Merlin was born into. Half Roman ruin, half older song. A land that had forgotten and remembered itself in the same breath. A land that needed a voice to call it back, even one as small as his. Back at the King's Hill, the workmen had been digging since dawn. The pit was nearly dry. The dark pool had become a shallow, muddy bowl. And in the center of the bowl, 2 long shapes lay still asleep in the wet clay. The king fell to his knees at the rim. He had built his tower on top of dragons. He had not believed the boy. He had drained the pit only to be sure of his own fear. Now he was sure. The boy stepped to the edge again. He looked down at the dragons. He looked at the king. He spoke gently now, the way you speak to a frightened animal. "They will wake soon. Stay back from the edge." As if his voice had been the cue, the red dragon stirred. It opened one slow eye. The eye was the color of a forge before the iron melts. The pale dragon stirred too. Its eye was the color of a frozen winter pond. They did not roar. They simply uncoiled. The pit suddenly seemed too small for them. The men on the rim stepped back without being told. Only the boy stayed where he was. He was the only one not surprised. The two dragons looked at each other across the pit. They had been sleeping there a long time. Long enough to forget almost the old quarrel. Now, in the open air, they remembered. The boy began to speak. His voice was not a child's voice anymore. It came from somewhere older. It came through him the way wind comes through a door left open. He was not making the words. He was lending them his throat. The red dragon, he said, is the people of this land. The pale dragon is the invader come from across the sea. They will fight. The pale will win the first battle. The red will win in the end. But it will take a long time. He did not stop speaking. He named kings yet unborn. He named battles yet unfought. He named the rise of a young king with a sword in his name. He named, though no one understood it then, a round table. The vision broke. The boy swayed. He nearly fell into the pit. The captain caught him. Vortigern, still kneeling, looked up at this small figure in muddy rain and said the words that would seal his own fate. "You are not lying." Vortigern stood slowly. He had been a warlord and a regent and a king. Now he was something smaller. He had heard his ending in a boy's voice. He took the iron crown from his head and looked at it as if for the first time. The king said, "Pay his mother in gold. Pay the old man in the hills more. Build my tower somewhere else. Or do not build it. The dragons can keep this hill." The boy was given a dry cloak. He was given a horse of his own this time. The captain rode beside him personally back into the hills. They did not speak for the first day. The captain finally said, "You saved my king's life." "No," the boy said. "I told him a true thing. He saved his own life by listening to it. That is the only kind of saving anyone can do." The captain rode in thoughtful silence for a long time after that. When they reached the hut, the old druid was sitting outside on a stone bench. He looked up and smiled, just barely. "You came back," he said. "I told you I would," the boy answered. "You told me I might," the old man corrected. The captain stayed one night. He sat by the fire with the old druid and the boy and ate plain barley stew. He had been a soldier all his life. He had never sat in a place this quiet. He told them so. "You could stay," the old man said. The captain shook his head slowly. "My king will need me, even more now that he knows the truth. The truth makes a king harder to follow. But it makes him worth following." The boy nodded as if he understood. He left at sunrise. He left the dappled gray horse behind. He told the boy, "You'll need this when they come for you again." Then he rode south alone. They would meet again. The boy already knew it. After that day, news of the boy spread fast. They began to call him the seer of the Saxon shore. They began to call him the boy who told Vortigern the truth. They began, sometimes, to call him by the name his mother had whispered. Merlin. He went on living in the hills. He went on listening. He helped the local people in small ways. He set a broken arm. He spoke gently to a woman whose son had not come back from the sea. He read the sky. He did not call any of this magic. Somewhere along these years, his beard came in. His shoulders broadened. His voice deepened. The boy with gray eyes became a young man with gray eyes. He was no longer Merlin. He was Merlin. The name fit him better. It always had. One winter, the old druid did not come back inside before the snow began. The boy, now a young man, found him asleep on the stone bench outside the hut. The old man's hand was wrapped around his staff. The staff was warm. The hand was not. The young man buried his teacher under the rowan tree behind the hut. He said the older words. He spoke them carefully. The wind came down the hillside and listened, then moved on. Some of the things he said were not in any book. He took the old man's staff for his own. He took the books. He took the small leather pouch of herbs and bones the old man had carried. He left almost everything else. He closed the wooden door of the hut. He did not lock it. He walked south, down out of the hills, past the ruined Roman watchtowers, past the half-empty market towns, past the river where the old druid had once shown him how to read the surface of moving water. He did not stop walking for many days. He came at last to a wide plain where 7 great stones stood in a half-finished ring. The plain was empty. The grass was tall. The wind moved across it like the breath of a sleeping thing. He understood at once what was supposed to happen here. People in the south had been trying to raise this circle for a long time. They had failed every spring. The stones were too heavy. The earth at this place was strange. They needed someone who could speak to the earth in its own language. Merlin walked into their camp at sunset. They saw a tall young man with gray, streaked dark hair and a long oak staff. They saw the silver brooch at his throat. They saw the calm in his eyes. The leader of the laborers stood up. "You are the seer of the Saxon shore," the leader said. It was not a question. "I am only Merlin," the young man answered. "But yes, I think I can lift your stones." The leader did not laugh. He had seen what he had seen. That night he walked among the standing stones alone. He laid one hand on each. He listened. The stones told him their names. The earth told him where it ached. By dawn, he knew exactly where the next stone would go. This was the beginning of the public work of Merlin. He was no longer the boy at the king's pit. He was a man with stones to lift, kingdoms to shape, a destiny that the dragons had named for him in a muddy trench, and many years yet to walk. He set down his staff at sunrise and began. While Merlin worked on the stones, a younger brother of Vortigern's enemies was crossing the sea. He came in a small ship with a small band. He had been raised in Brittany. His name was Uther. He carried a dragon banner. He landed on the southern coast at dawn. He had 200 men with him. He had a claim to the throne, a thirst for revenge, and a face that the soldiers of the country found, against their will, easy to follow. Vortigern heard the news in his hall. He had been a frightened man for some time now. He had begun to drink heavily. He had begun to dream of muddy red trenches. He told no one. The dreams were already enough. Lightning shakes the southern hills. The new king's army marched fast. They took 3 small forts in 3 days. Local lords who had hated Vortigern came to Uther's banner. By the end of the 2nd week, the campaign was almost over. Vortigern fled north. He took refuge in a wooden hill fort by a river. He sent for his last advisors. They did not come. He sent for his old captain, the one with the red cloak. The captain did come. He stood in the doorway and did not bow. "You owe me your life," Vortigern said. The captain was quiet for a long moment. Then he answered, "No, my lord. I owe a boy in the hills my life. You owe him yours. He has not come to collect. I will not collect for him." The captain rode away. Vortigern sat alone in his small wooden hall. He had once been a warlord. He had once been a king. He had once been a man who could be afraid and still act. None of those things were true any longer. 3 days later, Uther's men set fire to the wooden walls. Vortigern did not run. He sat in his hall as it burned. He had heard his ending in a boy's voice some time ago. He recognized it now. He did not fight when it came. The lords of the south came to Uther's banner. They knelt. They swore the new oaths. They asked one question first, the same question. Where was the seer of the Saxon shore? Where was Merlin? Could Uther bring him here? Uther had heard, of course. He had heard for years in Brittany. The boy who told the truth in a muddy pit. The young man who could lift stones. He had wondered if they were the same person. He sent the captain to find him. The captain rode west alone. He found Merlin on the plain at the half-built ring of stones. He did not have to ask. He simply rode up and dismounted. The young man and the captain looked at each other for a long, quiet moment. "There is a new king," the captain said. "I know," Merlin said. "He wants to meet you," the captain said. "I know," Merlin said. The captain laughed for the first time in a year. "Of course you do." They rode south together, through old Roman country and new British country, past field crews and small temple ruins and small Christian chapels just being raised in stone. Britain in those years was many things at once. It needed someone who could see all of them. They came to Uther's camp at evening. The dragon banners were up. Cooking fires were lit. Men in chainmail looked up from their work. Some of them stood. Some of them touched their brows. Word had moved faster than the riders. Uther stood waiting outside his tent. He did not bow. Kings did not bow. But he inclined his head, just enough. Merlin returned the gesture exactly. Two men of unusual judgment greeting one another for the first time. The captain smiled to himself. They sat together that night by Uther's fire. Just the two of them. The captain stood guard at the tent flap and listened to nothing in particular. The king and the wizard talked for a long time. Most of it was, surprisingly, not about the future. Uther asked the wizard about the captain, about the old druid, about the boy in the muddy pit. He listened. He did not interrupt. He laughed once. He fell quiet for a long time after that. Some kings listen for what they can use. Uther listened for what he could trust. "I will need you near me," Uther said at last. "Not as a servant, not as a slave, as a counselor. You will tell me when I am wrong. I will sometimes hate you for it. I will not punish you for it." Merlin considered. Then he answered, quietly, "Yes." From that night on, Merlin was at Uther's side. Not always. He came and went. Sometimes he walked off into the hills for weeks. Sometimes he was at the king's elbow in council. The lords adjusted. They did not always like it. They knew he was right too often. 5 years pass. Britain settles, more or less. There are still raids. There are still small wars. But there is a king again. There is a counselor who tells the king truths. There is a captain who watches them both. There is something almost like peace. In those years, Merlin finished the stone ring. He raised the last great trelithon at sunrise. The laborers wept. They had not known how much they had wanted to see it stand. Some things are easier to want once you've seen them whole. Then came the year that Uther saw Igraine. She was the wife of a Duke of Cornwall. She was, in the polite language of the chronicles, beautiful. In the more honest language of the chronicles, she was dangerous to look at. Uther looked. Igraine did not look back. She was a faithful wife. She was a thoughtful person. She was also no fool. She saw the king's eyes on her. She felt the room tighten. She told her husband, quietly, that they should leave at dawn. They did leave. Gorlois took her home to the cliffs of Cornwall, to a fortress called Tintagel, a black slate castle on a sea, rock connected to the mainland by a thin stone bridge. He sealed the gates. He thought that was enough. It was not enough. Uther rode west. He brought an army with him. He laid siege to Cornwall. He could not take the cliff fortress, but he had Gorlois and his men inside. He had Igraine inside, and he was not himself anymore. Merlin came to him at midnight. He did not pretend he did not know what was happening. He did not approve. He did not condemn. He sat on a folding stool across from his king and waited until the king spoke first. "Help me," Uther said finally. The wizard did not answer at once. "Help you do what?" he said. "You know what," Uther said. "I want to hear you say it," Merlin said. The king said it, in plain words. The wizard listened. Merlin spoke at last. He said the magic was possible. He said the cost would be very high. He said the child that came of this night would be a king greater than Uther had ever been. He said the price for that child was Uther's first true honor. Uther said yes anyway. Some men can hear a true price and still pay it. Some men can hear a true price and stop. Most can do one or the other. Uther was already across the line. He had been across it for some weeks now. That night Merlin worked an old enchantment. He gave Uther the appearance of Gorlois. He gave him the duke's voice, his beard, his stride. The wizard did not feel proud. He felt a slow tightness, low in his chest. The story had to go this way. He still did not have to like it. 3 days passed before Merlin speaks again. Igraine, deceived, opened the gates of Tintagel that night. Gorlois had ridden out to fight on the mainland. He died in the same hour, by chance or by something deeper. Igraine was, by morning, a widow who did not yet know it. She learned at dawn. She did not weep. She did not eat. She sat at her window facing the sea for a full day. She knew already that she had been deceived. She did not yet know who. The truth would come slowly. She would not forgive easily. She had not been raised to. Uther came back to her openly within the week. He did not pretend nothing had happened. He told her, at her own request, the truth. He told her about the wizard. He did not look away while he told her. She did not look away while she listened. She married him. Not in love, not yet. She married him because she was carrying his child, because the country was watching, because she had been, after long thought, a queen all her life and knew the difference between a wedding and a story. The wedding was first. The story would come later. She bore the child in the spring. A boy, small, strong, quiet eyes already. Merlin came up the stair himself. Igraine looked at him with a face that asked nothing and said nothing. She handed him the baby without a word. She had been told by Uther what would happen. Igraine had asked for one thing: to name him before he went. She had decided on a name from her own family, from the cliffs of Cornwall, an old name that meant bear. She whispered it into the small ear, Arthur. The boy would never remember her saying it. The world would. Merlin carried the baby down to the courtyard. The captain was waiting with 2 horses. They rode east through the night. Merlin held the small bundle against his chest beneath his cloak. The baby did not cry. He never cried much, this one. They came at dawn to a small manor in the hills. The lord of the manor was a kind man named Hector. His wife was kind too. They had a young son already, a boy of 4 named Kay. Hector knew Merlin was coming. He had been told by letter, only the smallest part. Merlin handed the bundle to Hector's wife in the kitchen. He told them only that the boy was the son of someone who could not raise him. He told them the boy must be loved as a brother to their own son, and a son to them. He told them the boy's name, Arthur. Merlin spent only a single afternoon at the manor. He told the family no more than they needed. He left them with a small leather pouch of coin, an even smaller pouch of herbs for the baby's first months, and a single quiet promise. I will return when he is 16. That night Merlin and the captain rode west again. Neither spoke for a long time. The captain finally said, "You have just changed everything." Merlin nodded. "Yes," he said. "Was it worth it?" the captain asked. "Ask me in 17 years, Merlin said. Igraine, in her grief, became a queen. She and Uther came in time to a kind of love. Not the love of stories. The love of 2 people who have done a hard thing together and decided to bear it together too. They had 2 daughters after Arthur. The daughters stayed. One of those daughters was Morgan. She watched her mother. She watched her father. She watched the world tighten around her older brother, whom she would meet only as an adult. She remembered everything. She forgave none of it. She would learn magic on her own. While the daughters grew, Arthur grew too, in a different country. Hector and his wife loved him as their own. Kay treated him as a brother, sometimes well, sometimes badly, the way brothers do. Arthur did not know he was a king's son. He thought he was a small boy from a small manor. He was happy. Time and place pause for a moment in the center of this story. Uther is aging fast. Igraine watches him fail. The captain is older now, his beard nearly white. Merlin, somewhere in the hills again, walks the old paths and waits for a year he has known about for a long time. Uther died in the autumn of Arthur's 15th year. He died in his own bed, with Igraine beside him. He died without naming an hair openly. The lords gathered. They expected a war. Merlin came down out of the hills the next morning. He had something else in mind. Stay with this. The boy in the meadow. The dying king in the bed. The wizard walking down out of the hills. They are about to meet in a churchyard. The story has been waiting on this for 16 years. Merlin had set a stone in the churchyard yard the night Uther died. He had set a sword in the stone. He had set words on the stone. Whoever pulls this sword from this stone is the rightful king of Britain. The lords had laughed at first. Then they had tried. Then they had stopped laughing. Many tried. None of the great names of Britain could move the iron. The lords accused each other of cheating. Some accused Merlin of trickery. Merlin only watched. He had work to do once a year. He waited. There is a question buried in every old British story. Are we free or are we written? The Welsh and the Cornish gave a strange answer. They said both. They said your fate is real. They said your choices inside it are real too. They said wisdom is learning the difference. A prophet who sees the future does not see a wall. A prophet who sees the future sees a long winding road. He sees the bends. He sees the place a traveler will stop to rest. He sees, sometimes, the place a traveler will fall. He cannot lift the traveler. He can only walk beside. For Merlin, the seer's burden was not knowing what would happen. The seer's burden was knowing why it had to. And still, knowing all of that, choosing kindness in the small moments where kindness was still possible. Most of his life, that is what he chose. The Britons of those years did not have a clean word for fate. They had several. They had the word that meant the river that runs through everything. They had the word that meant the song already being sung. They had the word that meant the path your feet have already begun to make. This is the world Merlin moved through. Not a world where nothing could be changed. Not a world where everything was free. A world where wisdom was, finally, the courage to walk a path you could see clearly, and to be kind on the way. The story comes back to the churchyard. The lords have failed at the sword for the third day. They are arguing now. They are accusing each other. Merlin watches and says nothing. He is waiting for a particular boy to ride into the yard with a particular older brother who needs a sword. Arthur was 16 now, tall for his age. Sandy hair past the jaw, strong from work, quiet, curious. He had ridden into town with his older brother Kay for Kay to compete in the great winter tournament. Kay had forgotten his sword at the inn. Kay said, "Brother, ride back to the inn and fetch my sword." Arthur turned his horse, willingly enough. Halfway there, he passed the churchyard. He saw the great stone. He saw the iron sword. He had not heard the news yet. He thought, simply and practically, that this would do. He could borrow this sword for his brother and return it after the day's fighting. He did not know about the words on the stone. He did not know what he was about to do. He dismounted and walked into the churchyard. He stood before the stone. He read the carved words slowly. He was a country boy. He had been taught his letters but not yet his pride. He read the words again. Then he reached up and put both hands on the hilt of the sword anyway. He needed it for his brother. He pulled. The sword came out as if it had been resting in soft sand the whole time. He did not register what had just happened. He thanked the stone. Politely. He walked back to his horse. He rode back toward the tournament with the sword in his hand. Kay saw the sword first. Kay knew what it was. Kay did not say so right away. Kay was, like most people, briefly tempted to lie. He started to tell their father, Hector, that he had drawn the sword. The lie did not last long. He could not look his father in the eye while saying it. Hector took both his sons aside. He asked Kay quietly. Kay told the truth. Hector knelt then to Arthur. He set the sword across his palms. He told Arthur, gently, that he was not Hector's son. He had been brought to them as a baby, by a man with gray eyes. Arthur did not understand. He did not yet have the words for what he was hearing. He looked at the sword. He looked at his father, the only father he had ever known, kneeling in the snow. He said, "You are my father." Hector said, "I have been. I will be. But I am not your blood." They returned to the churchyard. The lords were still arguing. Hector spoke first. He told them what had happened. They did not believe him. They told the boy to put the sword back into the stone. They told him to draw it out again, before all of them. Arthur did. He drew it again. The lords went still. One by one they tried again themselves. None of them could move it. Arthur returned, set both hands on the hilt, and drew it out a third time, just to settle the matter. The lords stopped arguing. The country had a king. None of them yet liked it. Merlin walked to the boy. The lords parted. Some bowed, some did not. Merlin looked at this tall, sandy-haired 16-year-old he had carried as a baby through a winter night 16 years ago. He had not seen him since. He saw, in a moment every year between. "I knew your father," Merlin said. "You will know him too. Not the way most sons do. But you will know who you came from. You came from love that was complicated. You came from a woman who was strong. You came from a man who was trying. You will be more than either of them." Arthur said only, "Will you stay?" Merlin smiled at that, a real smile rare from him. "For as long as I am useful," he said. "And then a little longer. Past my own usefulness. You will get sick of me before I leave. But I will leave when it is time." That night Arthur slept in the Lord's Hall in the town. Merlin slept on a wooden bench by the door, oak staff across his lap. He did not actually sleep. He sat and watched the boy breathe. He had been waiting 16 years for this watch. He took it seriously. In the morning, the lords gathered again. Some had still not accepted the boy. Some had ridden away in the night to organize their own claim. Merlin had expected this. He told the boy. He told him that part of being a true king was knowing who would not love him for it. Some say the captain returned that day, his beard now nearly white, and stood as Arthur's first sworn man. Some say he had never left. Some say he simply walked into the hall, knelt without a word, and put both his hands on the boy's. Whatever happened, he was the first. Other lords followed slowly. Some never did. The country split. Half the great houses came to Arthur's banner, half held back, watching. War would come. It always did. Merlin walked the halls in those weeks and looked very tired. The price he had foreseen was beginning to come due. Stay with this. It matters before the end. The boy with the sword is a boy first. He is afraid sometimes. He cries sometimes. He is not yet the king of legend. He is a 16-year-old whose entire life changed in one snowy morning. The wizard is teaching him how to be both at once. Merlin began to take him into the country. They rode together. They camped at small farms. They sat at the fires of country folk. The boy learned to listen. The boy learned to ask. The wizard taught him as the old druid had once taught Merlin himself. By naming. By watching. The boy asked the wizard one night, "By the dying coals, is it always going to feel this heavy?" Merlin considered carefully. "No," he said. "Some nights are quiet. Some nights you'll laugh. There will be friends. There will be a woman you love. There will be victories that taste like what they are. And there will be the heaviness too." "When I was your age," the wizard said, "I had already buried my teacher. I had already lifted the great stones. I was already lonely most of the time. You will be less lonely than I was. That is one of the few things I can promise you." Arthur slept then. Merlin sat awake until dawn, watching the slow turning of the stars. He did not yet tell the boy about the cave. He did not yet tell him about Viviane. He had a long way to go before he would. There was time. The wizard did not yet hurry. The first of Arthur's wars came in the spring. The old lords came at him with 11 separate armies. They thought a 16-year-old would break at the first charge. Merlin had told the boy what to expect. Arthur did not break. He stood. He fought. He won the first battle by surprise alone. He won the second by tactics. He won the third by sheer endurance. By the 7th, the rebel lords were broken. By the 9th, they were kneeling. By the 12th, the country was, for the first time in his life, a single country. Merlin walked beside him through every camp. They came at last to Camelot. It was not yet a great hall in those days. It was a fortified hill above a slow river. Arthur stood on the hilltop one evening with Merlin beside him. He said, "I want to build something here." Merlin said, "I know. I have seen it." That hilltop would become the great hall. The river would carry stones. The country would lend masons and carpenters. The wizard would draw the plans from a memory of something he had once seen in vision, when he was a boy in a muddy pit. The story had begun to braid back on itself. 3 days passed before Arthur asked Merlin about the round table. Merlin had drawn it on the plan. Merlin had not yet said why. The boy asked, "Why round? A long table seats more." Merlin smiled. "Because around a long table, someone is always at the head. I do not want that for you." Arthur considered this a long time. Then he asked, "And me? Where do I sit?" Merlin said, "You sit anywhere. The seat does not make the king. The kingship makes the seat. They will know which one is yours by where you choose to put your shoulders." 3 years passed while Camelot rose, stone by stone, beam by beam. By the time Arthur was 19, the great round table had been brought up the hill on a long ox cart, set in place, and surrounded by rough, hewn oak chairs. The hall was raw still. It was already a story. Arthur was 19 when he first sat at his round table with all his lords. The captain was there, white, bearded now, sword across his lap. Merlin was there, oak staff leaning against his chair. Each lord had a seat and none had the head. The country watched. The country liked it. But before any of this could be fully celebrated, there was one more piece of the boy, king's story, that had to be set in place. The iron sword from the stone was a king's sword. It was not yet his sword. Merlin told him so one morning. Arthur trusted that completely by then. They rode west the same day. They came in 3 days to a hidden mountain valley. The valley was thick with old oaks and silent of birds. Inside the valley, a still lake. The lake was the color of slate at first, then silver as the morning rose. It did not move. Even the wind seemed to step around it. "Whose lake is this?" Arthur asked quietly. He could feel the place. Merlin answered, "A lady's. I have not met her in many years. She remembers me. Walk to the shore. Hold out your hand. Wait." The boy did. The wizard stayed back. He did not want to interrupt. A small wind moved across the lake. The mist parted in the middle of the water. From the smooth surface, slowly, a single hand rose. It was a woman's hand. It was the color of pale river stone. It was holding, raised to the morning, the most beautiful sword Arthur had ever seen. Arthur stepped into the shallow water without thinking. He waded to the hand. He did not speak. He took the sword gently, the way you take something offered. The hand sank slowly back into the lake. The mist closed. The lake was still again. He had a name for the sword in his mouth before he knew where it came from. Excalibur. He waded back to shore with Excalibur in his hand. Merlin was waiting at the tree line. The wizard's face was steadier than Arthur had ever seen it. "This is the sword that will hold the country," Merlin said. "The other was the sword that proved you. You will need both. They are not the same." They rode back to Camelot. Word ran ahead of them, as it always did. By the time they reached the gates, the captain stood in the courtyard with the lords. Arthur drew the new sword. He held it up. The blade caught the high noon sun like a struck bell. Even the iron-bound men gasped. That night, Camelot held its first true feast. The hall was warm. The round table was full. Voices rose and laughed. The captain told a story about Uther that everyone had heard before, and they all listened anyway. Arthur sat among his lords, not at their head. He felt, for one quiet moment, what peace might mean. Merlin sat at the round table too. He watched the boy he had carried through a winter night now seated as a man among his lords. He let himself smile. Then he saw something at the very edge of vision. A shape passing the high arched window. A hooded shape. A shape he knew. He turned, but it was already gone. He did not say anything to Arthur that night. The boy was happy. Let him be happy. Tomorrow the wizard would walk the high battlements alone. Tomorrow, he would begin to plan for what was coming. The boy had become a king. The country had become a country. And the next chapter of the story had just looked through a window. It had a name. It would not wait. The morning after the great feast came too quickly for the wizard. The hall was still warm. The kitchen still smelled of roast. The boy, king, slept deeply for the first time in months. Merlin had not slept at all. He stood on the battlements and waited for the dawn to come. The captain found him there at sunrise. The old soldier was carrying 2 wooden cups of hot herbal tea. He set one on the battlement next to the wizard. He did not speak. He had been with Merlin a long time. He knew when to say nothing. "You saw something last night," the captain said finally. Merlin did not look at him. "Yes," he said. "I have been seeing it for some time." The captain considered this. "Bad?" he asked. Merlin almost smiled. "No, just inevitable." "A woman?" the captain asked. He had been watching Merlin a long time. He had a guess. Merlin allowed himself a small dry laugh. "2 women. In fact," he said, "different women. Different weights. The first will become the second eventually. Not because she wants to. Because the world will turn her." "Will you tell the boy?" the captain asked. Merlin shook his head. "Not yet. He has just become a king. He has just had a feast. Let him have a few good months. The bad will come. It always does. It can wait its turn for a little." For the first months of Arthur's reign, the country breathed. The harvests were good. The lords were obedient, mostly. The young king was loved, mostly. Word of Camelot reached as far as Brittany and the islands. People came to look at the king, who sat anywhere at his round table. Knights came too. They came alone, on foot, on horseback. They came with stories of monsters slain. They came with stories of mistakes regretted. They came hoping for a seat at the round table. Arthur listened to all of them. He did not turn many away. The captain quietly tested each one before they took a seat. One of the first to come was Sir Kay, Arthur's foster brother. The same Kay who had once tried to lie about the sword. He came expecting nothing. He had not forgiven himself. Arthur stood up at the round table when he saw him, walked the full distance, and embraced him. Other knights followed. Sir Bedivere, who would be there at the end. Sir Gawain, with his famous quick temper and his quicker laugh. Sir Lancelot, who came across the sea from Brittany, and would in time become the king's closest friend and the queen's deepest sorrow. Each was given a seat. Each was given a place. Stay with this. The story has been gathering for hours. The next chapter is about to bring in 2 figures who will change everything. The story is patient. So is the wizard. He will not warn the boy until he must. He will let the warm hall be warm a little longer. One late autumn morning, a rider arrived at the gate of Camelot. A messenger from Cornwall. He carried a letter from Igraine, the Queen Mother. She was old now. She had never come to court. She had never wanted to. She had heard her son was a man and a king. She wanted to meet him at last. Arthur read the letter twice. He looked across the round table at Merlin. The wizard nodded once. The king said simply, "My mother is coming. With my younger sisters. Make ready." He went outside to walk the battlements alone for an hour. Merlin let him. Igraine arrived 2 weeks later. Her hair was silver now. Her dark blue gown was simple and old. She walked into the great hall on the arm of an older woman attendant. 2 daughters walked behind her. The younger was named Morgause. The older was named Morgan. She was 25 years old. Arthur stood up. He walked the long distance across the hall to her, just as he had with Kay. He knelt and took her hand. He did not yet know what to say. He had been told he was her son 16 years late. He had a face full of questions and no rehearsed words. Igraine answered without words. She lifted his face with her free hand. She looked at him for a long moment. She found the small piece of her own face in his mouth and her own father's face in his eyes. She nodded once, satisfied. "You will do," she said softly. The 2 younger sisters were introduced. Morgause was warm. She liked her brother at once. She told a small joke. She made him laugh. Morgan stepped forward second. She did not laugh. She inclined her head with perfect courtesy. Her amber eyes were intelligent and very still. She looked at Arthur, and then, briefly, at Merlin. Their eyes met across the hall. The wizard inclined his head, just a fraction. Morgan inclined hers, exactly the same fraction. 2 people who recognized each other instantly without ever having met. The captain, watching, felt the temperature of the room drop 2 degrees. He looked at Merlin. Merlin's face did not change at all. Igraine and her daughters stayed at Camelot for the winter. Arthur grew close to Morgause quickly. With Morgan, things were slower. Polite, careful. They walked the gardens together. They spoke of small things. He liked her. He sensed, faintly, that he should not entirely trust her. He could not say why. Morgan, for her part, watched everything. She watched the way the lords spoke around Merlin. She watched the way the captain stood by the king's chair. She watched the way Arthur received messengers. She was learning. She had been learning all her life. She was beginning to want particular things. Merlin and Morgan met privately one evening in the small herb garden behind the kitchens. He had wanted to take her measure. She had wanted, just as much, to take his. They sat across from each other on a low stone bench. They spoke quietly. The conversation was civil. It was also exact. She asked if he had been the wizard who arranged her father's deception of her mother. He answered, simply, yes. She asked if he had ever been ashamed of it. He answered, slowly, no. He had been sorry. Sorry was not the same thing. She had not expected so much honesty. She did not enjoy it. She asked him if he would teach her, the way he had taught the captain, the way he was teaching the boy king. He looked at her for a long, quiet time. Then he said, some of it. Not all of it. Some things you should not learn yet, if at all. She inclined her head. They both understood. He taught her after that in the herb garden some afternoons. The names of plants, the reading of weather, the small quiet acts of healing. Nothing dangerous, nothing prophetic. She was a good student. She was also, the wizard knew, learning more elsewhere. He did not stop her. He could not have. She returned to Cornwall in the spring with her sister and her mother. She came back to Camelot every summer after that. She had her own household by 27. She had servants. She had visitors. She had, increasingly, her own books. The books were not all from places the wizard would have approved. Merlin saw, in scattered visions over those years, what Morgan would in time become: a sorceress, a rival, sometimes an enemy, sometimes a strange ally. He saw her wound her brother. He saw her save him too, once in a way he did not fully understand. He did not fight her future. He shaped what he could. He let go of the rest. It was that same summer that the second figure arrived. She came not to Camelot first, but to a small hillside spring deep in the Welsh forest. A young woman of perhaps 20, slender, pale, long black hair often damp, eyes the color of pale spring leaves, bare feet. Her name, she said, was Viviane. She had come up alone out of the lakes. She did not tell anyone where exactly she had come from. She had been told, by her own people, to find the wizard. She had been told he had something he needed to give. She had been told this was the year. She had walked very far. Merlin felt her arrival the way you feel the change in weather just before a thunderstorm. Far away, unmistakable. He was sitting in the round table hall of Camelot when it happened. He stood up suddenly. The lords looked at him. He said only, "I have to ride." He left the same hour. 3 days. He ate little. He slept less. The captain wanted to come. Merlin had refused him gently. Some things you did not bring a captain to. He found the spring at the end of the 3rd day. He found her sitting on a flat stone beside the water. She had been waiting all afternoon. He dismounted at the edge of the clearing. They looked at each other for a long, quiet moment. He had been seeing her in vision for 30 years. She had been hearing of him in song her whole life. They were both, suddenly, no longer abstract to each other. Some part of the wizard's heart, very old and very quiet, lifted just slightly. The story had reached its second turning. It would not be quite the same again. He sat down across from her on the moss. Neither of them spoke for some time. The water of the spring made the only sound. A single thrush called once from the canopy. The wizard's old steady heart had taken the shape of an open hand. "You are the wizard," she said finally. Her voice was softer than he had imagined and more direct. "I am," he said. "You have been waiting for me," she said. "I have," he said. "Are you afraid of me?" she asked. He considered. "No," he said. "I love what you will be. That is harder." She had not expected so plain an answer. She had been raised by people who spoke in riddles. She found, sitting across from him on the moss, that she liked plain answers. They surprised her. They softened her just slightly. They were not, she sensed already, going to keep her gentle. He asked her where she had come from. She told him about the lakes, about the lady who had raised her there, about the long pale corridors of the people under the water. She used a word for them that was very old. She had never spoken it aloud to a non-lake person before. He understood it. She asked him in turn where he had come from. He told her about Wales, about the old Hermit, about Vortigern's pit, about Uther's long siege, about a small boy carried through a snowy night. He had not told this story to anyone in many years. It came out simpler than he expected. It was almost dusk by the time he had finished. They stayed quiet a long time after. The thrush called again. Somewhere far up the slope, a deer moved. Viviane finally said, "Will you teach me?" Merlin's eyes did not waver. "Yes," he said. "I will teach you everything. It is what I have been waiting to do." They stayed at the spring that night. They built a small fire of dry oak. They shared the bread he had carried in his saddle pack. She showed him a small stone she carried that warmed when held. He showed her a small carved bone that listened when held. Two old students of small things, finding each other at last. They rode back to Camelot together 2 days later. The captain saw them first, riding up the long slope. He saw the wizard's face. The wizard's face had not looked like that in 20 years. The captain felt something shift, low in his chest, and he was not sure if it was joy or fear. It was probably both. Arthur was less surprised than the captain. He had grown to read the wizard well. He stood at the door of the great hall and embraced Merlin warmly, then turned to Viviane and bowed exactly the right amount. He had been raised by Hector. He knew how to make a guest welcome. He liked her at once, so did she him. She stayed at Camelot through the summer. She stayed through the autumn. She stayed through the winter. She had her own small chamber. She walked the gardens with Merlin in the mornings. She sat at the round table some nights, at his right hand. The lords adjusted, again. They had been adjusting for years. He began her lessons at the spring in the woods every week. They rode out together. They sat by the same flat stone. He taught her the names of plants. He taught her the names of stones. He taught her the older names of stars. He taught her, slowly, the listening. She learned faster than he expected. She came to him one evening with a small leather journal. She had been writing in it. She showed it to him. The pages held neat columns of plant names, stone names, star names. She had also begun, at the back, to write something else, older symbols. Symbols he had not yet taught her. She had picked them up somehow. He looked at the symbols. He recognized them. He had not used them in many years. They were not dangerous exactly. They were powerful. They were also, in his life, the symbols of binding. He looked up at her. She was watching him calmly. She had known he would notice. She had wanted him to. He did not refuse. He did not warn her. He simply said, "These are old. These are real. We can begin to look at them slowly. But first you have to tell me why you are interested." She thought about it for a long moment. She said, "Because I do not want to be afraid of anything." He did not laugh. He did not lecture. He simply nodded. He had heard that answer before, from himself, when he was younger. He understood it. He also knew the cost of it. He decided, in that moment, to begin teaching her the binding symbols anyway. He had not changed his mind in years. He did not change it now. That winter at Camelot was the warmest the wizard had known. The boy, King, ruled well. The captain was healthy. The knights laughed. Viviane sat at the round table and asked good questions. Merlin watched her every evening and let himself smile, even knowing where it had to end. The lords of Britain had begun to expect a queen for Arthur. The young king did not seem in a hurry. The wizard, asked privately by the captain one night, said only, "She is coming. Her name is Guinevere. The first time he sees her, he will not be able to look away." The captain asked, "Careful. Is that a problem?" Merlin sighed, "In time." The captain did not press. He had stopped pressing the wizard for details years ago. He had learned that some answers come with a weight that helps no one. He nodded slowly. They sat in the quiet for a long time. The captain finally said, "You are happy, Merlin?" The wizard said, "For now."
Yes.
In the spring, Guinevere came to Camelot. She was the daughter of a friendly Western lord. She was 20. She had a clear, honest laugh. She wore plain, pale gowns. She rode well. Arthur, as the wizard had warned, could not entirely look at her without his face going slightly still. The captain noticed. The captain said nothing. They were married in the early summer. The captain led the wedding procession. Merlin stood at the king's right hand. Igraine came up from Cornwall for the wedding. So did Morgan. Morgan watched the bride steadily. The wizard watched Morgan. Viviane watched the wizard. The web began to weave itself a little tighter. The queen settled into Camelot. She was loved at once. Arthur was happy in the small hours of the morning, walking the garden with her. Guinevere and Viviane became friends. Real friends. They walked the same garden in the afternoons. Guinevere did not yet know what Viviane was. She would not have minded. She would have wanted to learn herself. A year passed, then another. Camelot in those years was, the songs would later say, almost too good to be true. Knights came and went on quests. Merchants came from across the sea. Pilgrims came to look at the round table. The captain trained young men at the practice yard. Even the weather was kind. It would not last, it rarely does. Merlin and Viviane rode every 2 weeks to the spring in the woods. He taught her the older symbols slowly. She learned faster than any student he had ever had. By the end of the second year, she was teaching him things. Not from books he had given her. From elsewhere. He did not stop her. He listened. There was a small standing stone ring on a high heather moor not far from the spring. They rode there sometimes. They sat among the stones at dusk. He told her eventually that the moor stones were where the strongest binding work was always done. She nodded slowly. She filed it away. He saw her file it away. He knew what she was preparing for. He still did not stop her. The third year brought small troubles. A border war flared briefly with a pirate fleet from across the Irish Sea. Sir Lancelot rode to the coast. He won. He came back. He had spent a long time looking at Guinevere on his return. The queen had spent a long time looking back. Merlin saw it. He did not say a word. Arthur did not see it. Or he saw it and did not allow himself to know what he was seeing. The captain saw it. The captain did not say a word either. Some things are not improved by words. The country was at peace. The lords were obedient. The wheat was tall. The wizard let the warmth go on. Stay with this. The story is rich and complicated now. The wizard has shaped a kingdom and is letting the people in it be people. He is not pulling strings. He is watching. He is teaching. He is loving someone he knows will end him. Most of his work in these years is letting things happen. Viviane began, in those same years, to disappear for weeks at a time. She would tell him, in advance, that she was going to the lake. He would nod. She would return. She would seem heavier each time. She would seem stronger each time. Stronger and heavier are often the same thing in magic, as in life. When she came back, she would sit in the herb garden and let him look at her for a long time without speaking. He could read her changes. She let him. It was a kindness in its way. She was preparing him. She was preparing herself. They were both, in the slow, honest fashion of long love, getting ready. One evening she said to him, as casually as you might mention dinner, "You know I will have to bind you, in the end." He answered just as casually. He said, "When?" she asked. "When you are ready," he said. "I will not be ready for a long time," she said. He smiled. "I know that too." 3 days pass. They do not speak about the binding again for some time. They do not need to. It has been said. It has been heard. They go on with their lives the way two people who love each other go on after a true thing. They build small days. They eat plain food. They walk in the garden. That winter Morgan returned to Camelot for a Yuletide visit. She brought her sister Morgause. She brought her own quiet retinue. She had grown more beautiful in the last year. She had also grown more focused. She greeted Arthur warmly. She greeted the Queen carefully. She greeted Merlin with the same precise small nod of equals. He returned it. Morgan met Viviane that evening. They were introduced. They each inclined their head a precise small distance. They did not speak much. They did not need to. They had each known of the other for months. They watched each other across the round table at dinner. They were, in their separate ways, the wizard's first and second students. They knew it. Morgan asked Viviane to walk with her. They walked the long stone gallery together. They did not gossip. They spoke of stones, of springs, of the older symbols. Each was learning what the other knew. Each was glad and uneasy. Merlin watched them go. He let them go. When Morgan returned to Cornwall after Yuletide, she rode at the front of her column with a faint new smile. She had learned, in 2 long evenings, 3 things she would have spent a year hunting for. She had also been measured. She had also measured. She rode home with much to think about. That spring brought the first real shadow. A young rebel lord on the eastern border refused to pay tribute. He had heard, falsely, that the king's marriage was failing. He was wrong about the queen. He was right that Lancelot had been spending too much time at her side. The wizard had still said nothing. He still chose to. Arthur rode east with Lancelot. He won quickly. He came home wiser and quieter. He spent 2 evenings alone with the queen. They talked. She wept. He wept. They said honest things. They went to bed beside each other afterward. They were not finished, not yet. The wizard, watching, allowed himself to hope. Lancelot, ashamed, asked the king for permission to go on a long quest. Arthur granted it. Lancelot rode away west alone. He would be gone a year. He needed to be. The country adjusted. The queen kept her own counsel. The captain quietly approved. The wizard did the same. The country breathed again. The fields were sown. The summer came. The captain trained another set of young men at the practice yard. The wizard taught Viviane the last of the older binding symbols at the spring in the wood. He had nothing more to teach her after that. They both knew it. He kept teaching her anyway. Most teaching is review. The story of Merlin we know today did not come down whole. It came in pieces. The Welsh sang it in their old triads, short verses, 3 things at a time. The bards passed those triads from voice to voice across centuries. Most of the singers' names are lost. The songs are not. In the 12th century, a cleric named Geoffrey of Monmouth gathered the songs. He wrote a book in Latin about the kings of Britain. He gave Merlin much of the shape we know now. The prophet, the dragons, the boy who told Vortigern the truth. The book traveled across Europe. The story was no longer only Welsh. The French took up the story next. They added courtly love, knightly quests, and a much more polished Lancelot. They wrote long romance cycles in pale ink on bright vellum. By the 15th century, an English knight named Sir Thomas Malory pulled the whole thing into one book. La Morte d'Arthur. The Death of Arthur. After Malory came the Victorians. Lord Tennyson wrote a long poem, The Idylls of the King. He gave us a Merlin who is wise and tired. He gave us a Viviane who is dangerous. He gave us a Camelot we recognize as recognizably 19th century. The story kept changing. The story kept its shape. The bones were the same. Each generation took the wizard and gave him the qualities they needed to see in themselves. The Welsh wanted prophecy. The medieval French wanted love. The Victorians wanted wisdom and danger. We will see what the modern world wanted in a moment. The point is that he has always been changing. He has always been the same. We return to the wizard at the spring. The summer is coming to its end. The leaves are just beginning to turn. Viviane sits beside him. She has not spoken in a long time. He has not either. She finally says, "It is time." He says only, "Yes." She has chosen the place. Not the spring. Not the heather moor. Somewhere new to him. Somewhere new to both of them. She has been there twice already. She has prepared the hollow. The hollow is in a forest she calls Brasilienda, across the sea, in Brittany. Her people, the lake people, have an older claim there. They ride back to Camelot for the last things. Merlin has a few accounts to settle. He has a few people to see. He does not announce his leaving. He simply moves through his last days with unusual care. The captain notices. The captain says nothing. He is good at saying nothing. He has been practicing for years. The wizard speaks to Arthur first. He does not say goodbye. He says instead, "When I am gone, you will not be alone. The captain will still be here. So will Gawain. So in his own way will Lancelot. So will the Queen. Trust them. They are real. They will hold the country." Arthur said only, after a long quiet when. Merlin said soon. The king said, "How long is soon?" The wizard said gently, "Long enough for one more meal together. Long enough for the captain to oversee my packing. Long enough to walk the battlements once more. Not much longer than that." This is the darkest moment of the story for the king. Not a battle lost. Not a queen taken. The wizard who raised him is leaving. The wizard who shaped his life is going somewhere he cannot follow. Arthur sits very still for a long time after Merlin leaves the chamber. He does not weep until the door has closed. Merlin spoke to the captain next. The old soldier had already guessed. The two of them sat by a small fire in the captain's small chamber. They drank a cup of plain mead. The captain said, "I will not be far behind you, Merlin." The wizard answered honestly, "You will be more than 10 years behind me. Use the time well." The captain said, "Tell me where you go." The wizard told him. The captain nodded slowly. "Will you be all right?" the captain asked. The wizard considered. "Yes," he said. "I have known about this for 40 years. I have made a kind of peace with it. It will not be sad. It will be quiet." The captain stood. He embraced the wizard in the way of old soldiers, brief, steady, with no words. Then he sat back down. Merlin left. The captain stayed by the fire alone for a long time after that. He did not weep openly. He had never been a man for that. He felt the loss settle into him slowly, the way old wounds do. Merlin spoke last to the queen. He found her in the great kitchen herb garden, alone, in the cool of late evening. She looked up. She knew. He had not told her. She had read it in his face 2 days earlier. She held out her hands. He took them. They stood that way for a long time. She said only, "Take care of her." She meant Viviane. The wizard understood at once. He had not expected the queen to be so generous so quickly. He nodded. "I will," he said. "And you take care of him," he added. "Even when he is not easy. He will not always be easy. He has too much of his father in him. Sometimes, "Gun of your smile I will," she said. 3 days pass. Then he and Viviane left together at dawn. They rowed south toward the coast. The captain rowed with them as far as the harbor. He did not speak the whole way. At the harbor he saluted them. Merlin returned the salute. Viviane bowed her head. The captain turned his horse and rode back toward Camelot, without looking again. The crossing took 2 days. The sea was kind. The wizard stood at the bow most of the way. He watched the waves change color from gray to silver to slate to silver again. He held the staff loose in his right hand. Viviane stood beside him. She did not need to speak. He did not need her to. They landed in Brittany at evening. They did not stay in any port town. They rode immediately into the interior. Viviane led. She knew the way without thinking. The country smelled of salt for the first hour, then of pine, then, at last, of deep oak. The forest of Brasiliende was older than anything he had known. They camped in the forest that first night. They built no fire. They ate cold bread and apples. They slept side by side on a wool blanket. The moon was high and quiet through the canopy. Owls called twice in the distance. The wizard slept deeply for the first time in many weeks. Viviane did not sleep at all. They rode further the next morning. The forest deepened. The light dimmed. Even at noon, the world inside the canopy was a soft green dusk. Birds were quieter here. Even the wind moved slowly. The wizard felt his shoulders soften. The forest had a way of lowering a person's heart rate. It had been lowering hearts for 1,000 years. They came at last to the place she had prepared. A small hollow. A great pale outcropping of crystalline rock. A spring of clear water running along one wall inside. Ferns at the entrance. Soft green moss on the floor. A low stone bench at the center. He looked at her. She looked back. He nodded. They stayed in the hollow for 3 days first. They did not perform any magic. They simply lived there. They ate bread. They drank from the inner spring. They slept curled into each other on the wool blanket. They spoke of small things. The third day the wizard said, "I am ready when you are." The woman said, "Tomorrow at dawn." That evening they sat outside the hollow on a flat stone. He told her about his own teacher, the old hermit in the hills. He told her how the old man had been buried under the rowan tree behind the hut. He told her that he had loved that old man more than he had been able to say while he was alive. She nodded. She had loved her own lake, mother, the same way. Dawn came clear and cool. The forest was still soft green dusk inside the canopy. Merlin walked into the hollow first. He laid his oak staff at the foot of the low stone bench. He sat on the bench. He set his hands loose on his knees. He closed his eyes briefly. He opened them. He nodded to her. "Stay with this. It matters before the end. The wizard is choosing. He is not being ambushed. He is not being trapped. He could leave the bench at any moment. He has known about this dawn for 40 years. Today he is allowing it. Today he is consenting. The story is not a defeat, it is a yes." She walked to the center of the hollow. She stopped at the foot of the bench. She knelt slowly in front of him. She lifted her face to his. She did not begin the binding, not yet. She said quietly, "Are you sure?" He nodded. He said, "I love you. Begin." She began. She started with the simple older symbols he had taught her at the spring. She drew them in the air around him. The crystalline walls began to brighten softly. Pale blue light ran along the seams of the rock. A faint silver shimmer began to gather in the air around the stone bench. He did not move. He did not flinch. He kept his hands loose on his knees. He met her eyes when her eyes met his. He gave her freely the moments she needed to do this work. He knew better than she did how much harder it would be if he resisted. He did not resist. She drew the older symbols of binding next, the ones she had asked him to teach her in the small chamber by lamplight, the ones he had taught her without warning her. She wove them one by one around him. Each symbol settled into the air and stayed there. The cave was full of soft pale light by then. She rose. She walked once slowly all the way around the stone bench, completing a circle on the moss with her bare feet. Where her feet pressed the moss, the pale blue light followed and stayed. By the end of her circle, a perfect ring of soft light surrounded him. The cave was complete. She stopped at the foot of the bench again. She knelt one more time. She placed her hands on his hands. She said the last word. A single word in the older lake tongue, a word the wizard had never quite been taught. The cave brightened once, very briefly. Then it dimmed. The binding was done. He smiled at her. He had not smiled like that in many years. He said, "Thank you." He closed his eyes. His breathing slowed. The faint silver light at his irises faded gently into the dim. He did not die. He did not exactly sleep. He passed into a stillness deeper than either. The cave held him. Viviane stayed kneeling for a long time. She did not weep loudly. She wept slowly, the way you weep when you have done a true and difficult thing. She kissed both his hands. She kissed his closed eyes. She rose. She turned. She walked out of the hollow into the green forest light. She stood at the entrance of the hollow for a long while, her back to the forest, looking in at him one last time. He was still on the bench. He was still smiling, just barely. The pale blue translucent shimmer of the binding stretched over him like calm water over a stone. She inclined her head. She turned. She walked into the forest. She did not go far. She stayed in the forest of Broceliande. She built a small dwelling within walking distance of the cave. She visited the entrance every morning for many years. She did not enter. She simply stood at the threshold for a few minutes. He could not see her. She knew that. She visited anyway. It was a kind of conversation. Inside the cave the wizard rested. The pale blue shimmer kept him as he was. The crystalline walls glowed softly. The spring along the wall trickled into a small pool. The moss did not die. The ferns did not die. Time passed differently inside than outside. He did not age. He did not exactly dream, waited. Back at Camelot, the captain stood on the high battlements at the same dawn. He felt it. He could not have said how. He simply stood very still for several minutes. He bowed his head. He said quietly, "Goodbye, old friend." Then he went back to his work. There were young men to train. There always would be. Arthur knew too. He woke that morning with the strangest stillness in his chest. He sat up in bed. Guinevere sat up beside him. She put her hand on his shoulder. She said, "Hay has gone, hasn't he?" The king nodded. They sat together in the quiet for a long time. Then they got up. The day was waiting. The country was waiting. The wizard's cave became a quiet legend in those parts. The local people of Broceliande knew it. They did not enter it. They left small gifts at the threshold sometimes. A loaf of bread, a bundle of herbs, a small carved stone. The gifts disappeared by the next morning. Whether the cave took them or Viviane did, no one ever asked. They left the gifts anyway. 1,000 years passed. The cave stayed. The wizard rested. The story traveled. It went into French romance. It went into English chronicle. It went into songs people sang in halls and inns. By the 19th century, when steam trains cut across British countryside, the story was still being told. In the 20th century, an Oxford professor named J.R.R. Tolkien sat in his study at evening and shaped a wise old wandering figure of his own. He named him Gandalf. Gandalf was not Merlin. Gandalf was the second cousin of Merlin, in a sense. The gray robes, the staff, the deep eyes, the patient voice, the shape was the same. A novelist named T.H. White wrote a book called The Once and Future King. He gave Merlin a quirk. Merlin lived backwards through time, knowing the future because he had already been there. Children read the book in school. Disney made a cartoon. The wizard with the silver beard became, somehow, beloved. A boy from Liverpool named John Lennon liked the story. A Welsh poet named Dylan Thomas liked the story. A pop band called Camel named themselves after a small misreading of Camelot. The wizard kept walking through the modern world without ever leaving the cave. The cave was a base, not a prison. He had always been roaming. In every generation, somewhere, a child opens a book about a wise old man with a long staff and sees something they had been waiting to see. The wizard lends them his calm. The wizard lends them his courage. The wizard lends them, mostly, his patience. The wizard never runs out. The wizard is busy still. The story comes back, once more, to the cave. It is many centuries past Camelot now, in our reckoning. The hollow is still in Broceliande. The crystalline walls still glow softly. The spring still trickles. The moss is still alive. The wizard is still seated on the low stone bench. He is still smiling, just barely. Outside, in our world, the forest is not as deep as it was. The roads are paved. The villages have grown. There are tourists sometimes. They walk the marked paths. They take photographs. They buy small carved wooden wizards in the gift shop. They never quite find the hollow itself. The hollow is shy. The hollow has always been shy. Sometimes a particular hiker, usually alone, usually in late afternoon, takes a small wrong turn. They do not know why. They follow a path that is not on the map. They come to a small hollow. They do not see the cave. They feel something. They sit down on the moss for an hour. They feel rested in a way they had not been for years. They will not remember the hollow exactly afterward. They will only know they sat somewhere quiet in Broceliande and felt better. They will tell a friend, maybe. The friend will think it sounds nice. The friend will book a ticket. The forest will wait for them. The wizard, who is in the hollow they will not quite find, will rest on regardless. We come now to the final movement of his story. The wizard has not changed his place in many centuries. The story moves around him. Empires rise. Empires fall. Languages change. He remains. He is not exactly watching. He is being a particular kind of presence in a particular kind of place. That is enough. Arthur, in his time, ruled 20 more years after Merlin's last morning. The old captain died first, 10 years on, peacefully in his own bed. The queen and the king were estranged for a season, then reconciled, then estranged again, then mourned each other in a private way. Lancelot rode east at the end, Bedivere stayed. Arthur fell at the Battle of Camelot. Bedivere carried him to the lake where Excalibur had first risen. 3 women in dark robes met them at the shore. They lifted Arthur into a small black boat. The boat went out to the island of Avalon. Arthur did not, the songs say, exactly die. He passed into a stillness deeper than death, like his teacher. Some say he sleeps still on Avalon, waiting for Britain's hour of greatest need. Some say he rests in a hollow hill in Glastonbury. Some say he is, in his own quieter way, what Merlin became. 2 men of the same country, 2 long stillnesses. 1 pair of green islands, 1 pair of green forests, and a long patient waiting. Camelot fell. The walls weathered. The round table was eventually lost. Some say it was buried beneath the foundations of Winchester Castle. Some say it was returned to the trees that had given the oak. The country forgot the precise location. The country never forgot the table. Stonehenge stayed. It still stands. People come to it at dawn on midsummer mornings. They watch the sun rise between the great stones the wizard set in their precise place. They take photographs. They feel, for a moment, like the stones have been waiting for them too. The stones have. The stones are patient. The hermit's hut in the hills above the Welsh village fell down centuries ago. The rowan tree where the old druid was buried grew very large. It still grows there, the local people say, though no one is exactly sure which tree. The stones of the hut went into a sheep wall. The sheep wall is still there. The wizard is still there too, in the way old places hold their teachers. The story ends finally where it began. Inside the cave, inside the wizard. Inside the small private smile he wears even now after all these centuries. He chose this. He saw it coming for 40 years and chose it anyway. He is, in the cave, more himself than he ever was in any hall. Viviane lived a long life in Broceliande. She had visitors from across the sea and across the years. She trained quiet students. None of them quite became what she had been. She did not mind. Some days she sat at the threshold of the hollow and rested her hand on the stone for an hour. Then she would rise and go back to her own work. She died in her own time in her own bed. Her own students laid her gently in a small hollow not far from his. 2 hollows in the same forest. 2 students of small and great things. They had loved each other. They had ended each other. They had, in the older Welsh sense, completed each other. Some loves are like that. This is the wizard's story. Not the version of the songs alone. Not the version of the chronicles alone. The shape underneath all of them. A boy who saw too much. A man who taught a king. A teacher who chose to be ended by a student he loved. A presence who decided, in the end, to be quieter than fame. A patient voice in a hollow in an old forest. This is the climb to the height of his story, and the height is gentle. Not a cliff. Not a flame. A hollow in a forest. A man at peace. A door that he walked through with his own 2 feet, on a dawn he had been waiting for since he was a boy in a muddy pit. The wizard rests now. We will sit beside him a little longer. The world can wait. So why does this story stay with us? Why has it survived 1500 years? The simple answer is that the wizard chose his own ending. The deeper answer takes a few minutes more. A prophet who can see the future has, at first glance, no freedom. The road is set. The bends are known. The end is visible. What choice is left to such a person? Merlin's answer, given through 40 years of small steady action, was this. The shape of the road is not yours. The way you walk it is. That is the only freedom anyone has ever had. The same road can be walked in fear. It can be walked in panic. It can be walked in cold resentment. Or it can be walked in honor. Most of the wizard's life was the last one. He did not warn Vortigern in cleverness. He warned him because the man deserved a true word. He did not raise Stonehenge in vanity. He raised it because a country needed a heart of stone. He did not raise Arthur in pride of authorship. He raised him because the country needed a man who could sit at any seat and still be the king. The wizard had a gift for naming what was needed. His most famous act, the one we end on, looks like a defeat. A wise man bound by his student. A teacher undone by what he taught. That reading is too easy. It misses the wizard's actual choice. He could have refused to teach her. He could have walked away when he saw what was coming. He could have let his work continue without ending. He did not. He chose love over self-continuation. This is the wizard's deepest teaching. Knowing the cost is not the same as refusing to pay it. Sometimes the cost is the point. Sometimes the cost is the truest love you will ever offer. We do not, of course, see the future the way he did. But we know some of our own ends. We know we will lose people we love. We know we will, ourselves end. We act anyway. Maybe you know that already. Maybe you knew it the first time you let yourself love a friend. The first time you held a child. The first time you said yes to someone you would eventually lose. That is the wizard's gift to us. He shows us that the choice to love what will end is not foolish. It is the bravest thing humans regularly do. We do it every day. We are all in our way walking toward the cave. We are all in our way, students of someone we will outlive, or someone who will outlive us. The question is not whether the love will end. It is whether we will let it be real while it lasts. Merlin let it be real. He did not protect himself by holding back. He did not protect himself by leaving early. He stayed. He taught. He loved. He let the cost gather. Then he carried it. Most of us will not be sealed in a crystalline hollow in Brittany. Most of us will end in less mythic places. A bedroom. A hospital. A small chair by a window. The shape of the wizard's choice still applies. Choose love anyway. Teach what you know anyway. Trust the people who come to you. Walk toward your end with your own feet, in your own clothes, on your own dawn. That is by itself enough. The story is also, at its heart, a story about a teacher. The wizard had a teacher. The wizard taught a king. The wizard taught a woman. The chain runs through every generation. Each of us is somewhere on it. You are someone's student. You are also someone's teacher, in a way you may not yet recognize. Someone is watching how you walk. Someone is learning, just by watching you, how to walk through their own days. The wizard would tell you to take that watching seriously. Not because you must be perfect. Because the way you carry your own bad days is the most honest thing you will ever teach. Carry yours like Merlin carried his. Quietly, without performance, with small kindnesses to whoever comes near, with your eyes lifted, with the road, whatever shape it takes, walked freely beneath your own steady feet. Merlin has not stayed in his cave alone. He has traveled. Without leaving the hollow, he has appeared in almost every century since his binding. He is, in our imagination, the working shape of all wise old guides. When you read about Gandalf walking out of the dark of Moria, you are reading about Merlin. When you read about Dumbledore standing quietly behind a young wizard, you are reading about Merlin. The shape carries forward, the robe, the staff, the deep eyes, the patient voice, the willingness to step aside at the right moment. Each new wise figure is, in some quiet way, his student. He has appeared in opera, in painting, in cathedral glass, in cartoons, in films, on stage, on stamps. He has appeared on a children's chocolate bar wrapper. He has appeared in 1,000 small unimportant places. He has stayed himself in all of them. Picture the painters. Burne-Jones, in pale watercolor, gave us a tired Merlin in a hawthorn grove with Viviane bent over him. The painting is in a museum in Liverpool. Visitors stop in front of it. They feel something they cannot name. Picture the singers. Frank Sinatra recorded a song called Camelot in 1963. A British rock band wrote about Avalon in 1974. A musical called Spamalot retold the story laughing in 2005. The wizard, in each, was somehow still there. Picture the children every Halloween somewhere. A child puts on a long gray beard and a pointy hat with stars and walks down a sidewalk holding a stick like a staff. They have, briefly, become Merlin. They feel taller for it, they are. Picture the writers. Somewhere, right now, a novelist is sitting at a desk and trying to find words for a wise old figure. They are reaching, without exactly knowing it for him. He is glad to be reached for. Picture, finally, you, sitting somewhere right now, hearing a story your great-great-grandparents would have recognized. The wizard in the cave knows you are listening. Some part of him has always known you would. You are part of the chain now, not through grand action, just by listening, by letting the wizard, for one quiet hour, be in your room. He has been in many rooms. He has been welcome in all of them. He is welcome here too. The cave is quiet now. The crystalline walls glow softly. The little spring runs along one wall. The moss is alive on the floor. The forest outside breathes slowly. Owls call far apart. The canopy holds a soft silver light. The world is at rest. Next time, somewhere warmer, older sun, a different kind of fire. Something is waiting there. You will hear it next time. For now, only this. We will be here, when you are ready, whenever the next night comes. Whenever you find your way back. For now, the wizard is at rest. The cave holds him. The forest holds the cave. The night holds the forest. Let your shoulders fall. Let your jaw soften. Let your eyes rest. The story is finished. The cave is quiet. You are safe. You are warm. Good night. From the cave, from the forest, from the wizard, from the wizard's friend.